with Robbie O'Neill, Sean Rogers and Siobhan Biggane. Able to get stuck into signings, into transfer windows closing, into big wins against Newcastle, late wins against Newcastle, and build up to the Merseyside derby, the only game in football that has always got a number. You picked the number for this one, 1473rd Merseyside derby, coming against Everton on Saturday morning at 12:30. Everything that you need on TAW Live all the way through here for you. It is a pleasure to be here on the Friday afternoon. Coming up as well, we've got John Gibbons talking to Tom Kane on his Play 97 Plus, which is a part of the Liverpool Theatre Festival. Something very much to keep an eye on and look forward to. Should be a pleasure to be part of that. So we've got Tom coming as well. If you listen to this as a podcast, if it's just as a live, thanks for sharing your Friday afternoon with us. It is a pleasure to always be part of people's Friday afternoons. I hope you're looking ahead to the weekend and be careful. There's traffic on the Strand as we speak. Siobhan Biggane, it's a great win against Newcastle. I heard you on the pink. I would say you were
post-match pint.
I would say you were in your cups and your element, as I would be fair to say that I most definitely was as well. How much fun was it sticking it to them in the end?
Like, it was so much not fun during the match. Like, so massively unfun. Like, whatever the opposite of fun is, misery. And I was saying to John beforehand, I was just so ready to come in and be like, I don't know where we go from here. Like, do we just draw games now? Is that what this is? Like, you know, last week was just a flash in the pan. It's just how it is now. Are we just a bit shit? And then I felt so alive that I had nothing to contribute. I had nothing to contribute to the conversation whatsoever. And I think sometimes, like, you know, we're a bit spoiled sometimes in how routine some things can feel. And I think that the bit of jeopardy doesn't half make you realise what you're in it for. Felt absolutely fantastic at the end of it. But, you know, once we got over all the excitement, we did relive some of the match, and it wasn't a battle of laughs all the way through. Like, but my God, it was a laugh at the end, especially seeing as they were the architects of their own downfall.
The funny thing about the game, Robbie, and this is the thing that really weirdly, I've had a couple of days in Newcastle Twitter, and I've actually quite enjoyed it because it's been better than arguing with Liverpool Twitter. But one of the things on it, Robbie, for me was they were acting as though we weren't aware of the fact that we weren't very good. Whereas every Liverpool supporter I've spoke to is firstly had the attitude of, one, we got away with one. Two, has had the attitude of, you know, like, they got what they deserve. But three, almost everyone I spoke to said if they'd have made that more of a game, they probably could have won 2 or 3-0. And that's the thing that I took from it. If they'd have stopped messing about and stopped wasting time, they genuinely could have won the game 2 or 3-0.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen them play 3 times this season, and they are undoubtedly a team on the up. They've got a lot going for them. They've got some really good, they've got a good, strong squad now. They've got a strong band to the team, and when they really put their minds to it during the game, they caused us problems. There's no two ways about that. We were frustrating us. They were getting men behind the ball. They weren't doing that like Newcastle thing, which, you know, prior to Eddie Howe, they just got they consistently got a fuck up in them, haven't they? But they just looked a lot more disciplined, and in a way, it was a bit like they're getting ahead of themselves. I feel like if you're going to employ that level of gamesmanship, I feel like get the other things right first. Do you know what I mean? I think it was like they were trying to old man in a way.
And they didn't need to. That was the thing, was they did not need to for me. I was watching just thinking, if you just keep playing here, you're able to open us up. You're able to frustrate us, but with the ball. You look well organised and well structured. I was stunned by it.
Yeah. And it was the fact that, like, his action something of an unknown quantity, and he was finding space between the full-back and the centre-back, and he was really working that channel really, really well.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he actually looks like a fantastic prospect for them, and he'll score a lot of goals. I think it should also be noted that Newcastle played us in City and caused us both massive problems, and they will do so throughout the season, which, again, then, for us, just shows how massive a 3 points that is. Because we've actually said, we weren't on our game. There's no two ways about it. But we'll dig in and we'll fucking score.
The hanging in, Sean, is the first thing that we do, and it felt a little bit different to recent going behinds. There is the chance from Diaz just before. It is the idea of giving them encouragement that I don't like, but it was the fact that it does go all the way. It does go all the way to the death. It should give everyone a boost, and I think it was just a little reminder of the snide you need. What I want them to take from it is you need that snide from minute one. You need that sheer focus from minute one. You don't get to sort of channel that. That's just got to be there, I think, for this Liverpool side in every single moment at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tightrope, like me and me boxing analogies, but it is that controlled aggression. And that's really difficult because, you know, you look at the group. I mean, you only have to look at, like, the bench, like it's brilliant, the reaction of our bench, but it's like, you know, you expect Nunez to be going absolutely. I mean, Nunez just looks amazing. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact we need the points, I'd just love to light him up like a firework and roll him out to start and just go and be crazy. I'm not asked about another 3-game ban. Get a 5. But we need the point. But we need the points, unfortunately. You know, Thiago, Matip, unbelievable, doing his best like Randy Orton impression. The problem is though, when you're actually that's fine sort of for us in a way, but in another way, I'm not sure it is when we're in there. Jurgen's been really positive about the atmosphere in his press conference today, but I didn't think the atmosphere was that good. And
he was positive about it from 1-1. I think he chose his words on that a tiny bit. He was like, from 1-1 onwards, we got to enjoy that. But before 1-1,
extremely fair, Neil. Yeah, that's completely correct. And I think we need to get to grips with that a little bit as a fan base and back the team in those moments and just accept a load of people are going to do that now against us. And I think for the Liverpool players, they've got to, as a group, there'll be some that are getting annoyed by it. There's some that aren't bothered about it. It might make a few lose a bit of intensity. Like we spoke about on the review, the most important thing is they just cannot lose that rhythm. And I think in a true kind, you know, as a group, I'd like to think they've been getting together, having a big chat about it, especially the senior players. I know this sounds weird, but whether it's sort of code names for how they want that mentality to be, whatever it be, how they can in a game get a simple message across the team that resonates with them as like an anchor, as to listen, we know what this is about. We've rehearsed this in training. We've talked about this. We know when this happens exactly what we need to do. I think from a Newcastle point of view, I think they showed a bit of naivety, and I think you'd be justified. They won't, but I would be questioning the manager for not being braver. He's gone into that game with the injury list that he's got and decided to go with that game plan. And at half time, he should have turned around to him and gone, listen, I'm not saying we go gung-ho, but we've got to counter-attack it on these and take advantage of that rhythm. Now, I'm not saying you start rushing goal kicks or anything, but they took that to a degree that was like small time, ultimately. And I think I can understand them going into the game with that approach, but not just the scoreline. I haven't seen how the games go, and I think they made a massive mistake. And I'm amazed there hasn't been more made of that elsewhere in the media, because it would have been the question I'd have been asking him, you know.
Well, it's like Sean. There's this, and I think it is difficult for a side that does feel, as Robbie says, on the up. There's the difference between when you're plucky and when you don't need to be anymore. And I think there's been a couple of times in our recent history where we've maybe struggled to find that balance ourselves. But I think there's a definite element to that where they're still trying to sort of act like, and there's still a general vibe around them, understandably to an extent. Like a point at Anfield would have been fine. My thing was watching that game, even when it goes 1-1, 5 minutes after it goes 1-1, I'm still thinking, we're here for the taking. And that's both concerning for us, and it's what we're going to go on to talk about. But secondly, for them, that's where they've got to go, hang on, these are there for the taking, and then cut their cloth accordingly.
Yeah, they're playing the game, they're playing the occasion and the size of Liverpool, and do you know what I mean? The prestige of us, not playing the actual game that's in front of you. But that's fine, because we go away with the points. And I mean, think what our dressing room would have been like, you know, and the next day. I do think, like we were talking off air about like what you would want for Saturday, and as much as they're really enjoyable, I'd love it if we could just have a few easy wins. I think this team really needs to stop being in wars. Like everything is 12 rounds slugging it out, and we could really do with just some easy wins cruising through. You know, I imagine the training ground is just. Can you imagine being in the physio room? We're going to have a load of players getting all the scars, wounds, and everything else dealt with. There's a load of players needing to be treated in there. It must be an absolute free for all. Be like the canteen in school when it opens at 12 o'clock and you got limited sausage rolls, fish cakes, and cake. You know, it's just absolute chaos in there right now, and we could just do with some easy wins, couldn't we? And cruise through the last 30 minutes of games.
Goodison Park doesn't offer that, but we'll come on to that in a little while, Siobhan. The importance of this for the young players, I think, is massive. Obviously, it's Carvalho who gets the winner, but, you know, Harvey Elliott was man of the match. The manager said that in his press conference today. He calls Elliott and Carvalho footballers through and through. I think I think he loves the pair of them, to be honest with you. I think he's not good at hiding his emotions at times towards his players in a number of different ways, the manager. But even in press conferences, even when he's meant to be calm, you get the impression he just thinks the two of them are tremendous.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because certain players really do get the dad treatment of him. And I can't even say it's like an age thing or a profile thing, because there's certain players you would fit into that and maybe not get it. I think that it's like I don't know whether it's he sees like a profile of a player that's a bit raw, a bit younger than he'd like them to be, kind of thing, and he's the one that's going to see them into maturity. But he's not wrong, certainly off the last 2 games. I think that there's a temptation to think that everyone played well against Bournemouth because Bournemouth were so poor on Saturday, and that, you know, it's kind of like there's no carryover, if you like, into future games. But Elliott was fantastic. He was absolutely everywhere. He was causing nightmares all over the pitch. The most promising positions were always from him or Diaz. I think he just needs everyone around him to help him out a little bit more, really. Carvalho, if only for the needle on full time or after the goal, he'll do for me. It was like a myth going around the pub at one point. Like, did he pretend to be injured? Did he really do that? Or did he just fall over? It looked a little bit like he was pretending to be injured, but he fully pretended to be injured. And then even in his interview afterwards, he was so unbelievably mature about when he was trying to be drawn on the Newcastle stuff. He gave it to them a bit, but without being drawn on it. And I just thought, oh, you get it. You totally get it. And I think for Harvey Elliott, obviously, he's had such an emotional time. And, you know, I personally wondered if like too much had been made of that around Bournemouth and how much that buoyed him to do what he did. But seeing him carry on in the same vein is extremely refreshing. And Klopp's not alone. I wish they were my sons as well.
Alisson should be fined. I'd fine Alisson 2 weeks' wages for not sprinting up to their end and cramping up. Like after what he did to Pickford, that would have just last year. I would have. If I was Alisson, I'd have gone right up to their goal on the corner of the away end, right by Pope, and I'd have cramped up. I'd have held everything, knee. It'd be like, you know what I mean? It'd be like hands, elbows, knees, and toes. Do you know what I mean? I'd just stayed there for ages.
You were nearly right with the childhood song there. It's head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
Head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
See, mine are 11 and 8 now. It's a bit past that.
There is
praying for the days. I think when there's games where he's just got nothing to do, that should definitely be his bit, that he just entertains everybody else, because he's just sitting there with nothing to do.
He plans it all out. There is something with them, Robbie, where, you know, to talk about what does sort of need to improve and what does improve in the second half is it's back to this idea. He gets Diaz and Salah close to the goal, close to Firmino, close to the goal. The equaliser is a wonderful goal, and it looks like it's what the plan is for this Liverpool team. You know, everyone, if you sort of, I was thinking about the goal, like not even trying to remember it in the stand. It felt like it was an arrow that was converging from all areas towards literally the net. So it's coming from wide, it's coming from down the middle. It was that shape. Everyone's doing this towards the goal, and that's what he wants, I think. But we can't have these continual 45 minutes where it feels like everyone's too far apart, where it's that disjointed. It's got to stop being disjointed if Sean's going to get his easy games.
Yeah, it is. It's funny. Like I just had an image then of a Liverpool goal being like the beginning of Dad's army. Loads of goals are just like coming right in at that one target. But absolutely, I think it's mad because I feel like that's a goal that has been months in the making, because I think a lot of talk's been about Firmino dropping so deep. And for that goal, he starts deep, he arrives late, kind of like an old like deep lying number 8. Well, do you know what I mean? And he gets on the end of it, and I mean, it goes through the player's leg, so you could argue it's a bit of luck, but the execution is I just think fantastic. And I think for Klopp at that moment in time, when the pressure's on for them to score that goal, will probably think, well, something's clicking, something's right. Because up until those moments, as you say, we were labouring. And I think Diaz, he started the game, he's so busy. He's so busy. And there was moments where he's starting on the left, but then you see him kind of like, he feels like he's too far to the right flank, close to Salah. It's like, you know what I mean? And
arrows across the pitch, but never really makes that much forward progress to a starting position.
That's it. But it's just all, as the game progressed, it was just, you were finding the feet. And I think, I mean, he's already been mentioned, but I think Elliott, I think his intelligence was just helping that in a massive way. Like the way he picks the ball up, and he's one of those players that like he'll take it on the half turn and his head's up already, and he's looking for that pass, and he's probably already seen it. But I think when he came on the scene when he was like 16, 17, I remember thinking there was no ceiling for what he could do. And that was when he was playing on that wide right. But now that you're seeing him like kind of more centrally and dovetailing with Firmino, was because he was doing, I thought in the lead up to that goal, him and Firmino were actually doing, you know, they were linking up quite well, and with the other two lads, as you say, getting closer to the goal. I think as we move into like this Everton game, I think it's going to be such a battle that we're going to have to we need to pick our moments really, really well. And if we can pick our moments and execute some of our kinds of like through plays the way we did on Wednesday, particularly for that equaliser, touch wood, we'll be fine.
Touch wood indeed. We'll come on to talk about Everton in a little while. Before then, we'll talk about the transfer window closing and the signing of our tour. Sean, the manager in his press conference, says safe on the ball. He says he's good in tight areas. Didn't work for him 100% at Juve. He says there's the potential, there's still more. Calls him a good age as well, and is in general just really pleased. Get the impression from what the manager says there, looking at some of the stats stuff, listening to what the Juventus fans have said, what some Barcelona people have said. He's almost like a bit of a diet halfway house cross of Wijnaldum and Thiago. And I don't mean that as a compliment. I mean a halfway house cross of the two of them. It's not quite sort of worked for him at Juventus, but this idea of someone who can look after the ball, who's safe on the ball, who will be able to get his way out of tight areas for Liverpool, be able to, you know, effectively progress Liverpool up the pitch, but he's not a final ball man. I think what Liverpool have got a profile of player that I'm intrigued by as something that the manager might feel as though it's a footballer he can polish.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's probably like a little Thiago, isn't he? You know, without that being disrespectful, like some of Lidl's brands are better than the actual brands, aren't they? Although I doubt this one will be. Look, a couple of positives are he's developed internationally a good relationship with Fabinho in a number of the games that they've had. And when he was at Barcelona, there was a lot of noise being made against him. John did an amazing, a load of great interviews yesterday. I managed to just catch the one with Guillaume Balaguer, and the impression Guillaume Balaguer seemed to give, paraphrasing, was that he seemed to really enjoy Barcelona upon his arrival. I think this comes down to attitude. Now, he's got the carrot dangle, and I think he's in the preliminary 30-man squad for Brazil for the World Cup. But he's going to want to be starting. And he's got a decent record for Brazil when he starts anyway. So I think this comes down to attitude. And if he really wants to get his head back on track, sees Liverpool as a big opportunity to do that, big opportunity to get in the World Cup, then you hope with his preparation, his rehab, hopefully keep him fit. I think it's solely down to his attitude, because I think in purely technique and ability terms, he's well good enough to be one of our 8 midfielders. I see there's been a lot of noise about how Liverpool will never take up an option to buy him. I find that interesting, because on talent alone, there's no doubt he's got that. And kind of the way that he likes to play in a 3-man midfield on the left, hypothetically would suit us as well. But I really think it comes down to attitude and how much he wants it and how much he can stay fit. And then settling in, I mean, he's obviously got the Brazilians there to help settle him in, and something Liverpool have done really well over the years as a club on and off the pitch is settle players in well. So I think I'm more positive about him than a lot of the others, and I'd certainly be starting him in Napoli, partly from his experience of being in Italy anyway. But I just think you start treating that almost like a pre-season for him and giving him the 60s. International clearance won't be through in time for Everton anyway, so there's no way he's going to be able to play a part. But I think I have higher hopes for him than I think what most of the chat has been about him.
There is, with him, Siobhan, the overarching thing becomes Liverpool having to reflect on why him, why this late, why a loan and not a purchase, and whether or not what they got wrong. Ultimately, it feels as though they start the window and it's Tchouaméni, and then it's Tchouaméni. It's not a midfielder. It's we want a Tchouaméni. They don't get a Tchouaméni. There's a full-throated defence of all the midfielders, and then the injuries begin to hit, and then it rolls all the way through until quite literally the last day before there's this lad. And you know, for me, it's not necessarily about the amount of money Liverpool spend, although you'd like to think there's some money in the bank there. But it feels to me as though Liverpool have managed to talk themselves into the idea that they need the perfect young player with a certain profile who's going to go absolutely mega. That's a Tchouaméni, it's a Bellingham, and not maybe a lad who we can coach into doing a really, really good job for us. And they're the players that actually got us to where we want to be in football. Wijnaldum, Robertson, Joel Matip. I've written a thing today. We wouldn't buy those sorts of players now, but all 3 of them are exactly what got us European Cup success, league success, and maybe we just need to be a bit more imaginative at times.
I think there's just got to be an acceptance that this probably wasn't the plan all along, and there definitely was some poor decision making, things we'll never know, whatever it is. But to us, all we can see is that, you know, you didn't want a fella, you insistently didn't want a fella. You've reflected on it here with the vitriol at which they did not want a fella, you know, a few weeks ago, all of a sudden to a couple of lads dropping and then needing a fella. I think that there's just got to be an acceptance that when you're doing something at this point in the window, whether it started 2 weeks ago, whether it started, you know, the day before it happens, I think there's that reflection that you're not shopping in the same market as everybody else. You're not shopping in a Chouameni market then, are you? Or a Bellingham market. You're thinking, right, okay, there's no shame in things not working out at Barcelona or Juventus, but the experience from that will be amazing. Who do we, you know, who in our who of the scouting team decided in our ideal starting 11 that we need to kind of be able to replicate the skill of, and the holding the ball and the passing and the decisiveness of? They've said it's Thiago, and this guy seems to be the one that can do that. I was reading about his, this may well be one of those things that people like me just hold on to, but Brazil's win rate when him and Fabinho play together is like so much higher than the win rate when one of them plays or neither of them play. So there's a promising little thing that might exist, and I just think that this wasn't the guy from day one, and that's just worth accepting at this stage. But I'm like Sean, I feel quite positive about it because, as I said, there's no shame in things not working out quite as much as they wanted to. Obviously, the injury concerns. Again, if you're shopping at this time in the market and at this kind of end of the pool, I wonder whether that's what you're left with, kind of thing. And that's the only thing that gives me a niggle. But we've got a niggle with everybody else in that concern. So what's new?
I'll add another one in there. Robbie, it's interesting to me. City is still doing business at the very end of the window. They do the Dortmund centre half, which, because it's City and because no one really pays that much attention to City, it doesn't feel that panicked. But if you buy a centre half the last day of the transfer window, I feel like it's a little bit panicked somewhere. United have been still doing business right up until the very end. Chelsea doing business right up until the very end. Everyone, a lot of Premier League clubs seem very eager around doing business right up until the very end. So it's important not to sort of go too far. But the issue here is, it is just Liverpool sort of trying to work out their priorities, I think, and then also working out the plan within that, because it can't be genuinely, we're doing footy wrong if there's only two midfielders in the world who suit us. Yeah, that's what I think, and that's where I end up. And that's where, and I think we've sort of got ourselves into this mindset that we either buy a young player or we go absolutely massive on a sure thing. When, as I say, a lot of what we've done really, really well with this manager has actually been taking players who other sides aren't quite that sure about, but he sees something in the character and something in the ability, and he goes and gets the best out of it.
Yeah, I think with Arthur, I think one thing that hasn't been pointed out, I actually think he suffered because of one of the weirdest accounting tricks in football history.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, you don't sign for Barcelona, and if you're crap, you simply don't. He had a decent start there, and just due to an accounting trick, he's ended up at Juve. I think that coupled with injuries has probably, done for him over there. He's obviously got ability, as has been pointed out. He plays with Fabinho for Brazil. I think there's a conversation to be had about Fabinho generally over the last 6-7 months. He hasn't been as good as he can be. Back in the last season,
he looks physically off it to me.
He does, and I think maybe a player like Arthur, who, as you pointed out, is like this cross between Wijnaldum and Thiago, who can get about, who's a bit tall, but he's a bit taller at the same time, and he can pass the ball, he can break the lines, etc. I think that actually might be a good compliment to Fabinho moving forward, because the thing is, it's not just a case of we've got no injuries in the field. It's about the players we can get in there that can function together. And currently, the players that we have had, they haven't been functioning. So if this lad can come in for 7-8 months, do a job, and actually get himself in the World Cup squad, because that's the other thing as well. This is uncharted territory. You talk about panic buying. This is a season like no other. There's a World Cup smack bang in the middle of the season. Clubs are still all the talk with City is about how they're going to run away with it. It looks like it. They probably will. But even though they're scoring loads of goals, they're winning loads of games, what I will say is the games I've watched with Manchester City this season have been much more competitive than at any point in the last 2 or 3 years. So I think the gap might be shortening, and maybe it's a temporary thing, maybe it's this season. So I don't think it is necessarily panic buying. I think it's clubs going, well, we don't know where we are here. We've got to react. And I think we've just done the same thing. I agree with you though. there's not going to just be like two players that can come in and strengthen this Liverpool midfield. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get into like these kind of things are like odd territory, because sometimes you can see the stuff that goes down on Twitter, but we are short. I'm just happy at this point that we got someone.
For me, Sean, there's what we've asked the midfielders to do. If you take it from, say, 20, let's say from when Van Dijk signed, so the very start of 2018, through until maybe even literally the European Cup final. You know, maybe it's bookended by two magnificent Champions League runs that end in defeat by Real Madrid. What Liverpool asked the midfield to do is so arduous, it's so intense, it's so tough, the three midfielders. I can understand how you can end up going, God, you need a special footballer to come in here who's got to have this massive list of attributes and gifts. And they're also quite sort of specific. It's not the same as just the best ones. It's like you've got to be tactically so disciplined for this. You've got to be so switched on over here for this. You've got to have a certain level of physicality over here. But we need you to, you know what I mean? I'm almost like, you know, there's a part of Liverpool that feels as though they could do it with 3 James Milners in that period. And some people wouldn't like that, but that's the way in which he went. He's talked about double sixes and he's changed it now. And you look at our tour, playing to the left of someone like Fabinho, and you can imagine how that will just be a little bit more straightforward in this shape, where he's not asked to be both a left winger, a centre mid, someone bombing on over here, covering his full. You know, obviously you've got to do some of that all the time when you're playing football. But this sort of shift to a bit more of a 2 and a 1 rather than there's 3 of us and we've all got to do everything all game. It might make recruitment a little bit easier, I think. I think that this is one of the directions of travel Liverpool could do with, because they can't have this situation that they think playing for Liverpool is the hardest job in football, because someone's got to do it.
Yeah, I mean, as you just said there, the 3 midfielders tended to do very similar things, didn't they? Whereas now it's very much, we've been talking about it a lot on the other shows. I know you've referenced it a lot, Neil, that it seems very much more to be a double six with a much more attacking option, with Harvey Elliott filling that much more attacking option. I mean, it's interesting that if you think of Milner, he was a wide player at Man City who would be, in midfield terms, much more of an 8 than a 6. Wijnaldum was a 10, pretty much at Newcastle, maybe play on the left in a 4-4-2. Adam Lallana, typical player in between the lines. Man City have brought loads of players in like De Bruyne, David Silva, Bernardo Silva, and what they do is actually merge them into midfield. And I've said this for a while. If Michael Carrick was coming through an academy now, you'd be grooming him as maybe a 6 or centre half, because the way the game's going is, what were your number 10s and your creative players? Messi broke the mould in 2009 when he started pressing like Piqué and Rush. So any player out there now hasn't got an excuse not to press. And then you look at what Klopp and Guardiola have done. You can now put into midfield, because of how hard it is in there, the speed of the game, the pitches. You need people who are so press resistant that can get out of a telephone box with the ball. That's why you like Bernardo Silva and Harvey Elliott, who you'd never have dreamed of not that long ago playing in central midfield, if you want to use that phrase. And now in there, I think on recruitment very quickly, years ago we were talking about this. The problem in that recruitment team is you start defending your record. And it's all very well and good, the stats bomb conference with Graham going, transfers have a 48% pass rate, but that's not what they're aiming for. Their jobs might be on the line if that was what happened at Liverpool. They've got a completely great defence to say, well, look at the standard of player we've now got at Liverpool. How do we recruit for that with either a worldie or a young player coming through? And that's completely valid. But like you've just said, what we used to do, and this is where I think Klopp's risk comment came in, is we would sign players who might be more of an 8 to 10 in mid. Look at Oxlade-Chamberlain as a perfect example. He was man of the match playing left wing back for Arsenal, and I've been a wide player, and we convert him into more of a midfield player. And pre-injury, you know, that was something that was going really well. And it seems that Liverpool kind of stop doing that a little bit, and it's all very good saying in a stats bomb conference, you, as technical as this is, you replace a 30th percentile squad player with a 70th percentile squad player, and it might make a 2-point difference at most across a season and this kind of thing. But we literally lost the league title by a point. So if I'm one of the I'm quite defensive of FSG in the recruitment, and if you look into the accounts and stuff like that, and this isn't the show for that, like, I could make a really strong defence for them. But things like that feed rightly into the other argument of that's exactly why we should be improving, particularly the midfield squad element of this, because we literally lost the title by a point. And that's why you need to do them things rather than go, there's a huge risk and there's only a small reward. Well, yeah, but the reward was the league title. And I think that's where it's really difficult, and I don't think you can entrench yourself in either camp really when it comes to recruitment in that area.
Okay, just very briefly, Siobhan, in his press conference, he discusses he shuts down chat around Naby Keita in particular with an injury. He mentions Chamberlain out with an injury as well. Says Thiago's closest to those not training. The Keita thing feels, you never know, we'll never have the full information. The Keita thing feels like something's got out of hand here relatively quickly, just from the tone the manager appears to be taking. He's very rarely been, we said before about the footballers who he loves, the ones he wants to be the father figure to. He seems very quickly to have reached something close to the end of his tether, just in the tone and something to do with his body language. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, and feel free to tell me if I am.
No, when I was describing earlier, like, it's sometimes a little bit surprising where Klopp leans in his fatherly tendencies. I had Naby Keita in mind, because obviously if we talk about Oxlade-Chamberlain and Keita in the same conversation, it's always around the injuries, and there's always a very sympathetic tone towards Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, maybe less so towards Naby Keita. And these comments that have come out firstly from Keita and then subsequently from the manager make me think that there's a skill and will gap, if you like, and that's attitude. And I think that all of us, when we all saw those comments, we all went, mate, come on, don't be messing with us now. This isn't our fault. This isn't the club. It is what it is. There's, that this isn't like a choice thing. This isn't a will thing. So I don't know whether they're having the exact same feeling of how dare you. Not how dare you. I don't mean it in that kind of dramatic, like melodramatic way, but like, what do you think you're playing at, coming out with those comments and those that steer you're taking in terms of what you expect and what your preference would be, and how you've been mistreated when we've not been able to use you in the way that you were bought to be used. Like, that's nobody's fault, but don't make out like it's our fault. So I completely agree. I think there's a skill and will gap, and I think it's to do with someone's attitude changing.
There's a tonal shift in the manager, no shadow of a doubt. Listen, we could go on about all the bits and pieces, and we're doing a variety of shows on the Anfield Wrap. Do download the app. Loads of brilliant stuff has been made clear about our tour, but also right the way through, and everything that we do. Great reaction to the result against Newcastle, and lots of other bits and pieces, and looking back at the entirety of the transfer window in the end as well on the Anfield Wrap. Download the app and enjoy that. Coming up now, we are very, very fortunate indeed to be able to look ahead to the Liverpool Theatre Festival. Lots and lots of fantastic stuff around that. And here we've got Tom Kane on his Play 97 Plus speaking to John Gibbons. If you're listening to this as a podcast, and if you were not listening to it as a podcast or as a live, or in fact you are on the podcast, we're back now, and we're going to look ahead to Everton in the next 10 minutes or so. We're going to do full derby build-up, and again, the manager's press conference, Robbie, he says that Darwin Nunez is in really good shape and used the time to work physically and tactically. He says he is settled. I tell you what, he looked settled on Wednesday night, didn't he? I enjoyed the fact that someone felt the need to restrain him at one point, and supposedly he was calling the Newcastle bench for everything all the way through the match. He's rambunctious. He's got me excited.
Oh, he was his best Vitruvian self, and behind that dugout, wasn't he? He was just like arm stressed. He looked like an ultra, didn't he? It was insane, because I was buzzing about it, but then I was like, fucking hell, he's just been sent off. You know what I mean? He's going to come back like that. But I think that if he has got his mind right, and he can harness that energy and that aggression, and just that passion and enthusiasm, that's exactly the sort of player that you want playing in a Merseyside derby, because they are going to that place tomorrow. It has got the potential to be an absolute bear pit, and I think sometimes when that place is like that, you need a player who's going to go like Gerrard used to do it. He used to go, all right, I'm going to match you for intensity. I should be in that away end, but I'm not. I'm out here. So all of you who are giving me grief, who are singing whatever, I'm just going to come straight at you. And I feel like a player like Darwin tomorrow, if he has had the couple of weeks off, which Klopp said, I think he could be a massive plus. I also think that he's probably got a burning desire to prove a lot of people wrong. I know when he had that spell in pre-season where he hadn't scored, he was getting a lot of grief online. That he was straight on. You could see he wanted to put something right. And I think in a way, him getting sent off the other week might be the best thing that could have happened, because he's got a point to prove now. So
and that's out of his system as well. He doesn't get to do two of them.
Exactly. So he's got a point to prove, and he knows what he needs to improve on. And he's got He's got the best group of people around him who can actually say to him, all right, you've made your mistake now. You win or you learn, and you've learned. So get into the derby and win.
He was absolutely broiling. It's a fascinating one as to what the manager does or doesn't do, Siobhan. I feel like, and I mean this as a compliment, I feel like if Darwin Nunez plays, Darwin Nunez one way or another will dominate the Merseyside derby. There will be more Darwin Nunez than anyone knows what to do with in the Merseyside derby. That might not mean Liverpool win the game, I hasten to add. It just means that he will be the most present footballer anyone's ever been.
I'm not convinced he's learned his lesson. I'm not convinced. I'm also not convinced I really want him to learn his lesson in a way. As Robbie's just said, that edge is they're the margins on games like this where it's like a fight, isn't it? Like, but maybe not so soon.
Maybe not from the start. Maybe on 60.
Has there ever been an arrest on the pitch at the Merseyside derby? Genuinely judging by his behaviour on Wednesday, which I'm all for, by the way. I really love the fact that he had no regard for the club property and got up on his chair to give absolute bifters to them over there. Like, I'm totally for it, and he's really grasping the language nice and quickly. I'm nervous enough. And that will be like a centre of nerves from the beginning, because I'll just be watching and going, don't you do it. Don't whatever you're about to do, don't do it. But having said that, on Wednesday, I really would have loved a big lad in the middle, because we kept doing the same thing over and over again, and there was no big lad in the middle to deal with it or make anything of it. And that would be great if that's there. But please, just, I'm just not convinced he's had enough time out yet.
I feel, Sean, like Siobhan has captured what will be going on in the manager's head and in the conversations he will be happy having with his backroom staff here, which is he probably looks incredible in training, Darwin. He's probably the absolute business. And they're probably doing a session with him right now as we're recording this. And he's absolutely shining. He's striking everything. They're looking at each other. And then they're having a little chat to one side going, but can we do it? Can we do it? As they watch him find some sort of way to bite into the red meat that's just magically appeared adjacent to the pitch and wash it down with a bottle of red wine. This is this is what Liverpool have got to try to work out as to what they can or can't do with them.
Yeah, everyone pre-match meal tomorrow's on like scrambled egg and toast, and he comes down just eating like raw cow, just actually old, isn't he? Desperate Dan kind of style. One for the kids. I honestly think there is a difficulty. So look, Jota, I think, will be included in the squad and he get time off the bench against Napoli and then integrate him that way. He's only done one session yesterday. Firmino has quietly worked his socks off the last few weeks. Without the ball, he's been putting in some serious effort, and you would have normally thought that Bobby for Napoli away in the Champions League game is a sure thing, but exactly everything you've been discussing, you would think you go with Bobby. He knows exactly what Goodison's all about. Ideally, you bring Nunez off the bench to reintegrate him. With Liverpool winning, when there's less pressure on, they're not going to be winding him up as much. You can go and enjoy it. There's no pressure on to score, do whatever, and it's nice and relaxed. There is a question for me that you want Bobby to stay fit, and I just don't know if you can. I would be questioning whether you want to go back to the well with him with this short turnaround time post Newcastle. And I also think that Nunez could really damage their centre halves, but not in quite the way that comes out, but probably that way as well. I actually think that he's the last thing they would want to come up against. The issue I've had since summer, in a way, was I felt in the summer when he was getting stupid social media chat, I couldn't believe he came out in response to it on social media. Like Salah and Haaland wouldn't do that on a Champions League game, and I felt that it just showed a bit of rawness emotionally, if you like. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd much rather have someone with his passion that you sort of bring back down to controlled aggression, if you will. That, like, you can't inject that into someone. So you'd rather have like a Rooney-esque player that you've just got to sort of tame a little bit, if you will. But that's over a period of time. So is it fair on him in a way? It's all very good saying, look, I've learnt my lesson. But to throw him into that when they see the team sheet and know exactly what they're going to do to him in that cauldron. It's a big call for the manager. I mean, Nate, what would you? I mean, I'm assuming if this feeling I get is everyone's kind of like start Bobby, bring him off the bench. But I mean, what would you do now?
I'd start Diaz 9, and I'd start Carvalho off the left, and I'd start Salah up front, and I'd put Elliott in there as well. And then you've got loads of bench moves on 60. You've got Firmino, you've got Nunez, you've got bench moves on 45, I'd say as well. You know, I think there's an argument around that. There's an argument around have a little look at, but genuinely, that's what I'd do. I think I agree with you on Firmino and it being possibly a game too far for him. But if you're then looking at a bench and you've got Jota, Firmino, and Nunez to look at, if you feel as though you need to find another gear in there, that's what I'd look to do. And then from there, you can then, because the thing is, you bring any of the three I've just named on if you haven't started them. At any point, it's a completely different football match. You change the game in one fell swoop, especially if you bring, if it's Carvalho who comes off and it's any one of the three I've just said who comes on and Diaz then moves. And I think having that in our back pocket would be no bad thing. So I wouldn't, for all the chat around, I'd have all three of them all three of the lads who can play number 9, I'd have on the bench. And then from there, and you can say you want to rattle Everton centre half. The thing I'd say is, listen, Cody and Tarkowski, whilst they've got strengths and weaknesses, they've been around the block a little bit. They're not naive footballers, and they're going to want to be smart. Whereas if you look, Everton have conceded, Everton have been attacked down there right and have conceded a raft of chances between the right back and the centre half, whatever shape they've been playing. And
the two fullbacks are shocking, aren't they?
So if you have Salah tie them up one side and Diaz and Carvalho tie them up the other side, then maybe either someone can break through the middle, or you suddenly got Diaz and Carvalho running at Patterson and Cody. And maybe that works for us, and that's smarter than the other options.
Patterson could be got on as well. Because I watched him the other night, and he actually plays all right, the kid, but he's so young. He's so young, and to me, it just looks like the type of game where a lad like that is going to get it. I mean, he's played in an old firm, I imagine, but I think it's different because I think with the old firm, it's like there's a lot at stake, but. It's just those two clubs, but I just feel
they're quite well matched as two teams. That's the thing. There's not the idea that one is bigger budget than the other. I'm not just going to slaughter the Blues. Bigger budget than the other ain't like that. Like we ultimately, on paper, Everton versus Liverpool is an equivalent fixture. They finished 16th last year. Yeah. It's an equivalent fixture to Leeds versus Liverpool, and you expect Liverpool to win that game if you see what I mean. And that's the point here. The point is he's going to have a lot to do. If we play well, Patterson has a lot to do, that isn't the case for the old firm.
That's it, and I think as well with if you play Carvalho, as you suggested, on the left, he's a box of tricks. We haven't really seen him in that position yet because he's tended to kind of like float between midfield and attacking it in the line. But if you can get him to hug that line, he'll do it, and he'll do it well, and he'll cause him problems, and he'll draw him in. And then if Diaz is floating as a 9, they're not going to know what to do with him because they'll be preparing for him to play on the left. So that kid's head's going to go if that's the case. I just think that it's interesting what you say about getting those three on the bench, because if there's any game that's a war of attrition, it's a Merseyside derby. And if we've got the bigger guns to come off the bench later in the game when things might be a bit out of hand or may but not be going in our favour, I think that might be a good play. So yeah, I'd be with you with it.
Manager says it's a big fight, but you have to play football as well. He says Newcastle's perfect preparation for it. He's referring, I think, in terms of the intensity and also, I think, the gamesmanship. Siobhan, he says, but more football means you're more likely to get something from the game. Interesting that out of the press conference. The old lady will be rocking. One of the issues is, not dissimilar to Newcastle, they'll applaud, while it's 0-0, while it's 1-1, they'd applaud the time wasting. And I think this is the thing that we need to be aware of. There's no morality here. There's no obvious sort of common courtesy or decency. Anything that disrupts Liverpool, sides are now into. They want to disrupt Liverpool. There'll be no side that wants to disrupt Liverpool more than Everton. We've just got to know that from minute one, as where we started, really, in a sense, in this conversation, that the old lady will be cheering time wasting, cheering delays on goal kicks, cheering delays on throw-ins. We've got to be ready for it. We've got to be ready for everything that they do.
Yeah, I mean, because if we thought our game was bad, I think Everton Leeds was even worse in the week, wasn't it? Wasn't it like 50 minutes the ball was in play? Like that's ridiculous. And I think that what might not hurt in that instance is that it's away and it's not at home. So the old lady might be rocking in favour of it, but they haven't got 44,000 people on their back when groaning, when it's not, because that would just work the other way, wouldn't it? That would just be further kind of firepower behind it. So I think that will make a difference. And also I think Newcastle this might not be what the manager was getting. I don't think it was, but it's a good one to get the the emotional response to that situation and that happening to you out the way, and to bear in mind that it can all go tits up for anyone who's planning on doing that as their game's plan. It may be a legitimate way to manage your game. It may be a legitimate way to take points off big teams, but let Wednesday be a cautionary tale of what happens when you don't do it to any sort of effect. So I'm concerned about it just because I think it'll turn it into an absolute dog of a game, and that will suit them. But I'm not concerned about it from it all of a sudden tricking us or trumping us, because we had a carbon copy of it a few days ago, and I think if we're ever ready for it, it's now.
They've got a fair few new signings. He doesn't sub anyone against Leeds. Now, they played Tuesday, but they have the midweek game last week as well, Sean. But he doesn't sub anyone, Lampard, against Leeds. I think he's the first manager this season who runs them all the way through, and he's got 5 subs as an option. The flip side is he's added Idrissa Gueye back in from Paris Saint-Germain. You wouldn't have thought, he certainly doesn't need to find out what the layout of the place or anything like that. It's worth pointing that out. James Garner also looks a lively prospect, and whether he starts or whether he starts off the bench, that might be up in the air. But the thing is, these lads haven't played together, and there's the possibility that Everton could be a little bit disjointed. There'll be a lot of fights, don't get me wrong, from Everton. We know that and we expect that, but there's the possibility Everton have been disjointed so far this season anyway. And I think to return to a theme we talk about on our review show all the time, for me, the most important thing here is Liverpool just don't give them any encouragement. And we've got to match them from the opening. And if that matching them is they're sitting off, they're not really engaging very much in the first bit, then we've got to make sure we dominate. If that opening is they come flying at us, then I think we've got to reciprocate, fight fire with fire. I think we've just got to find our way through that first 10 one way or the other, but make sure that by the end of that first 10, it's quite clear who the superior football is.
Yeah, what we didn't do against Man United is first 10 minutes here, we've just got to get territory, and then you can take a read for what Everton are going to do. Like you just said, Neil, if they're going to sit off, okay, we can move the ball around, move them side to side and work it out. And we've proven we're extremely good at that. If Everton want to come out all guns blazing again, just go for the territory. And I think whoever plays nominally wide forward, I know there's been a lot of chatter about, how wide they've been, whether that's on instruction, whether they're not following managers' instructions, quite whatever. I think in the first 10 minutes here, I would be looking for them to hug the touchlines. Their fullbacks are poor. And I'd just be looking for Liverpool to do diagonal ball after diagonal ball. No risk of losing it. No risk of your touch not being right. No clearing a ball and then blocking it for a throw and getting the crowd up. Like, we gave United stupid encouragement from just even them blocking passes of ours out for throw-ins. And I think you've just got to get the territory and go, okay, you've got the ball, you're at home. What are you going to do? You're throwing 5 yards from goal. What are you going to do? Because we're going to pounce and look to break on you. And you'll get an idea. Liverpool will be able to read that first 10 and go from there. And I think that's what I want to see, really, is just territory and not giving them any silly free kicks, corners, giving the ball away in the middle of the park or anything. And this Liverpool team to get a read on that in the first 10 and see where their nerves are jangling. I also think that I probably would go quite pragmatic with the team selection to win the war, because for the reasons you've just given, Neil, I think they'll blow a gasket. If he has to use his subs, he's using them under duress. I can't see them doing the 90. They're not used to 3 games a week. He's not made any subs because he's trying to send a message to either the board or the players that he wants them out, ultimately. He's not going to be able to do that. Idrissa Gueye will start for no other reason than I think he just won't want the criticism of the fan base if things go badly, and he doesn't. So, I think Liverpool have got to get the territory for me, and just, I've got no issue potentially with your Milners and all them starting first 45, because I think Carvalho, Nunez and others like that could run riot last half hour here, regardless of the score. I just think they're going to blow up if we do the right things to sort of contribute to that. Who
do you think he starts Milner next to Fabinho?
I think he's got to, because I think as Sean's just pointed out, I think control is essential tomorrow, and I think you need a wise head in there. I think he will start Fabinho with Milner, and I think it'll be Elliott. I think it'll be them 3.
Siobhan, do you think he'll start Milner?
Yes. And it'll either be a booking in the first 5, or it'll be calm and steady.
Sean, I think he might start Curtis Jones, to be honest.
Do you know what? Ultimately, yeah, it depends on what his tactics are. If you're going with my tactics of basically play rugby union for the first 10 minutes, then you go in Milner in the middle and probably Bobby in the 9 and if he's taken the, I think from his post-match comments after Newcastle, the impression he gave was that he doesn't think Liverpool are in great nick and that this is going to be a fight. But since then, he's talked more and more about the football element of this. And there's if he is going to go with your view, Neil, that maybe you go Diaz central, Carvalho on the left, then maybe you do put Curtis Jones in and go, no, we want to make this a football match. So yeah, if you want to make periods of fight, I think we can put in a bit of fight, but we're bringing this back down to what it is, and that's a football match. So I think it more depends on what he wants, because I would rather be bringing Curtis Jones on, Carvalho on, Nunez on, players like that, when they're blowing a gasket, I think, in the spaces come in second half. So I think it depends on what Klopp wants in terms of whether you put the footballers in or like your Warriors, like your Milners and your Bobbies.
Yeah, my one last thing before I ask you for predictions is just I think you might remember Jones's performance at Southampton away, and where he plays very much as a very responsible midfielder, looks after in the middle of the park, draws a lot of challenges, a lot of press out of Southampton, and knocks the ball around brilliantly. And the manager loved that performance post-match. He went out of his way to state it. And I sort of wonder if he might think, you know what, that's almost what I want. I want them to think they can get at him because I want to watch him escape. And I think that's what they might go for.
Yeah, I think that's key. I think
it's a fitness question.
Yeah, also, and I think if they are going to start at Trezeguet, how much of a tactical plan can they put in that midfield if they're going to start him? And I think he's going to just be like running like a headless chicken, just trying to just break play up without any kind of like real tactical cohesion. So I think from that perspective, Jones would be a good shout. And also, as he's played the game before, he scored like a fantastic winner in the Merseyside derby. So he's not going to hold any fear in there. I think it's interesting because because that's so many problems with injuries with the midfield. It's hard. It's kind of, I didn't even realise he was fit, to be honest with you.
He was on the bench, but he doesn't get off against Newcastle. How fit he is up for debate. Well, not from me. I've got no data. I'm not going to debate it with anybody. I don't know. Is the answer? That'd be the end of the debate.
Do you think he's fit?
Well, if I'm saying if he's fit, I'll play him. But I'm not. But I don't know. Is the end of that? Listen, do you think we're going to win the game, Sean?
Yes, and I think last 20 minutes, I think we could have a bit of... I think it might be a nightmare first half, but I think last 20 minutes we're going to really hurt these.
Okay, Robbie?
Yeah, tough game. I think it'll be tough, but I think we're going to win.
Siobhan?
Yes, I think it'll be like at Anfield last season, when it was just like they played terrible, but managed to somehow play better than we expected them to, and then we blew them away with off the bench.
Okay, yeah, I think it's going to be absolutely brutal at Goodison Park. I'm going there about as confident as you can be within reason, but it's a Merseyside derby, and Liverpool aren't playing that well, and haven't had a win yet this season. This is a state of affairs that I could very much do without, but that's what we're in it for after all. Because if it didn't mean what it means, you wouldn't be as nervous as you are, and that's the way in which the conversation works. It is the biggest game of the season in so many ways, Everton away. We may not all agree on that all the time, but when you wake up tomorrow morning, nothing will feel bigger. Siobhan Biggane, Sean Rogers and Robbie O'Neill all looking ahead to Saturday morning, Saturday lunchtime, and the old lady, trust me, will be rocking.